Today I have another weather story for you, and this one is a classic. It is so famous that it's even been turned into a movie. And this one's called Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, written by Judy Barrett and drawn by Ron Barrett. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning. Pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice, and Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat. Grandpa was doing the flipping. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling, and landed right on Henry. After we realized that the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully. All the other pancakes landed in the pan, and all of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall-tale bedtime story he'd ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, there lay the tiny town of Chew and Swallow. Have you noticed that in the beginning of this story, the pictures were all black and white, but now they're starting to change color? And Grandpa is about to tell a tall tale bedtime story. And a tall tale means that it's made up. In most ways, it was very much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees, and gardens all around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some cats and dogs. But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. The sky supplied all the food they could possibly want. The only thing that was really different about Chew and Swallow was its weather. It came 3 times a day, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that everyone ate came from the sky. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained rain, and it never snowed snow, and it never blew just wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas, and sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Wow! Can you imagine looking out your window and seeing a rain of orange juice or snow that was actually mashed potatoes and peas? That would be so delicious, but it would also be very crazy. The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, knives, and napkins with them. That way, they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, people took them home and put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry in between the meals. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny-side-up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast, and most of the time, it rained milk afterwards. For lunch one day, frankfurters already in their rolls blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby, and the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. This town sounds delicious! That would be so handy to never have to cook breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and it would just be ready right on time. And this restaurant is very cool. I don't know if you noticed in the picture, but you can come and sit at the restaurant and there's no roof. So the food you're going to eat just falls through the ceiling and you catch it when you're ready to eat. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by a gradual clearing and a jello sunset. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for a sanitation department. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it into the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so that the soil would be richer for people's flower gardens. They don't waste anything in this town. They compost all of the leftover food and make sure they feed all of the animals in town. That is a great way of taking care of all of the extra food. Life for townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Spaghetti ties up the town. One day, there was nothing but stinky cheese all day long. The next day, there was only broccoli, and it was all overcooked. And the next day, there were Brussels sprouts, peanut butter, and mayonnaise. Another day, there was a pea soup fog. No one could find the rest of the meal. It all got stuck in the fog. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. People were getting scared. Storms blew up frequently, and scary things were happening. On Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls. Some had seeds and some didn't. There was white bread and rye bread and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they'd ever seen before. Everyone had to stay indoors, and the mess took workers 4 days to clean up. To help out, the people piled as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it a bit, but most of it just stayed there and got staler and staler. There was a storm of pancakes one morning and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of its weight, so they had to close down the school. Can you imagine having to shut down your school because a giant pancake covered in maple syrup fell on top of it? Oh man, that would be terrible. One day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick and ended up with a stomachache. There was an awful salt and pepper wind accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly and running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. The sanitation department gave up cleaning. The job was way too big. People couldn't go outside most of the time, and many houses were starting to get damaged by giant meatballs. There was no more school for the children. So a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. The people glued together giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style, with peanut butter. They only took the absolute necessities with them and then set sail on their rafts for a new land. The food just got to be too big and too much, so everyone has to leave the town of Chew and Swallow. Could you imagine building a boat out of giant pieces of bread and peanut butter? That would be a little bit scary to sail in. And look, they have a big piece of pizza for their sail. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well, and they were able to build themselves temporary houses out of it. The children began school again. The adults all tried to find a place for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at a supermarket. They thought it was odd that food was kept on shelves, packaged in boxes, cans, and bottles. Meat had to be cooked and was kept in refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds above their heads were not made of fried eggs, and no one ever got hit by a hamburger again. And nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what happened to it. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember him giving us a good night kiss. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window. We ran downstairs for breakfast and ate it a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down the hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top, and we could almost smell mashed potatoes. The end. And look, it's a picture of mashed potatoes, and it does kind of look like the snow hill. That was a very silly story about some crazy weather. And in our craft today, we are going to make up our own crazy weather. You will need some glue, things to color with, and your week 2 Storytime bundle. And in it, you'll see that there's one thick purple strip of paper and a few other thin purple strips of paper. There's 2 pages of tissue paper. There is this piece of paper that's really important with a square on it. And then I also gave you 2 Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball coloring sheets. This book is also a really funny movie, so if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. Now, using our very important piece of paper with a square on it, we are going to turn it on its side so that the thick, empty white spaces are on either side of our square. And what we are turning this square into is a window. And what we need to do first, before we draw something in the window, is decorate our wallpaper. You can see I made some green flowers with purple on it, and that's my wallpaper. Now that my walls are decorated, it's time for me to create some crazy weather outside of my window. I started with some grass and a tree, and let's see if you can guess what crazy food weather is happening outside my window. There are lots of circles. There's some pink stuff. Oh, can you guess? That's right! It's raining donuts outside my window! But that's not all. It's also raining orange juice out of one cloud and coffee out of another. That sounds so delicious. Now we're going to put the rest of our window together. We'll take our thickest purple piece of paper and we'll make that into our windowsill. Then we'll take the rest of our purple strips of paper and glue them all around the outside and down the middle and across our window to make a shape just like this. Now there's one thing missing from our wild weather window, and that, of course, is curtains. We are going to be using an accordion fold to make our curtains out of tissue paper. So take your paper and fold it one way and then flip and fold it the other way, just like I'm doing in this video, and it will turn your tissue paper into an accordion shape. Once it's all folded, just spread some glue beside your window and stick those curtains in place. Do the exact same thing all over again for your second curtain, and then you will have a wild weather window to share with your family. I can't wait to see what food you think should be turned into weather. Thank you for sending in these fun pictures of your crafts. I can't wait to see more pictures next week. See you next time. Bye!